I certainly, we can't put a blanket and call all journalists and generalize it, that they all are like that. But it's worth pointing out that a lot of them are. And, I don't have to say on air who is and who isn't. I think people who watch the press conferences know. Zidane said he's attended many press conferences, obviously. He's done many press conferences, rather. And I would say I have attended many of them. And I can tell you that what you're saying is true. Even if he got those questions, he wouldn't have really answered them. And Ewan and I were talking about this on WhatsApp. We were talking about that paragraph. And I think it's, just in case, I think everyone is familiar with it now. Maybe I'll read some of it. Let me see. Let me bring up that section really quick. I'd like to take this the quote is, "I'd like to take this opportunity to send a message to the journalists. I've given hundreds of press conferences, and unfortunately, we have spoken very little of football. Though I know that you love football, this sport that brings us together. However, and without any desire to criticize or lecture, I would have liked the questions not to have always been about controversy, that we might have talked more often about the game and above all, the players, who are and always will be the most important thing in this sport. Let's not forget about football. Let's care for it." So he is 100% right, 100% correct. This is, for those of you who watch the NBA, this is the classic Kevin Durant speech where somebody asked him about some random off-court stuff, and he was like, "Don't you guys want to talk about basketball?" and all that stuff. I totally sympathize with all of that stuff. That's why we do this podcast, because we love talking about actual football. And Ewan and I were kind of saying, like, even when he gets those questions, he doesn't really answer them in great detail the way we've been blessed with, occasionally talking to Tuchel or Pep when we face them. Like, the away coaches are much more open to answering questions like that. I also think when I said, like, I've attended hundreds of pressers, I think I maybe it hasn't reached hundreds. I don't know. It feels like hundreds. It's been a lot. It's basically almost every one. He basically doesn't like being there. And I honestly feel like he will say he's not tired and all this stuff. I honestly think for him, the worst part of the job, beyond, like, the scouting reports, managing the players, managing all these different things, the worst part of the job for him was sitting in the press conference. He hated it so much. You could tell it in his face and his body language. He's like, "I don't want to be here. This is awful. I hate this." It got even worse when it went to Zoom. It really was a chore for him. He really, really genuinely hated it. But I think it would have been, as much as he didn't talk, really answer football related questions in great detail, I also think he would have preferred those questions any day, to sit through at least that and kind of dodging those questions more than he would have, I think it was the last game or before the last game, he was asked, would Real Madrid be better off without you? So I think it's a combination of not talking about football, but also being disrespectful too.
Yeah.
The lack of respect was apparent. Like, people have no sense of tact and respect when they ask those questions. There's a lack of integrity too when the questions are asked. And so I think all of that builds up, and, Zidane deals with it one way and he'll kind of dodge it. And then at the end of the season, he'll write a letter like this. There's also Jose Mourinho, who just pops basically and just comes out with guns blazing like a machine gun to everybody in the press conferences. There's different ways of dealing with it, but it's annoying. I think it's a culture that needs to change. When I tweeted that paragraph, one of the comments from somebody was, "Zidane should have answered more questions from people like you." And I think it's worth pointing out, it's not up to Zidane what he gets to answer and what he doesn't. It's the PR guy. And I want to take it one step further. And this is not something that's really common knowledge that fans really know about, but it's also, there's the PR guy who sits beside him, amazing fellow. Couldn't speak even higher about him. He's a really, really nice guy that we have good relationships with. It's not even up to him. He directs the flow of the press conference, but it's the same 4 or 5 people who are allowed to ask questions regularly. And for be it good or for better or worse, that's how it works. And I think that's a culture that is, this is part of what you're saying about, like, you know, the PR and
Yeah,
Florentino and the demographics and stuff. I think this is a culture that needs to change. This is not no
yeah,
longer, it's no longer just people from Spain attending and watching these press conferences. You're going to have a global audience. You're going to have global journalists. I think I may be the only one who regularly attends from outside of Spain, unless it's a bigger Champions League game or something. Um, and I would like to see hopefully more people like me, when you maybe like the younger people who are interested in talking about tactics and reaching a global audience. There's that. There's another thing here too, that there's a part that in that paragraph where Zidane says, um, without any without any desire to criticize or lecture. I think, and I can't prove this, but I think there's a subliminal message there, and it's like he's like, look, I don't blame you guys for asking these questions, because I don't even think that you guys have a choice in the questions you ask. I think it comes from your bosses to say, okay, this is
yeah,
what gets us the hits. This is what gets us the clicks. And even then, I would take it a step further and say, I don't even think it's their fault. I think it's the fault of the masses who consume this shit. Because you look at managing Madrid, for example, we get complaints about like posting these news transfers and headlines and stuff, and we try our best not to. But then you look at what people ask for and what people consume, is there's a discrepancy in between it. You know, our tactical analysis that can take sometimes days or even weeks to write, get like half the traffic of a news article with a clickbait headline. So this is just kind of the way it works. This is a bit of a
yeah.
digression. I'm all over the place too, but I think you know what I
Well,
mean.
just to add to that, I mean, I do think though, and I'd love to see kind of the comparison from like, even if you compare it to the early 2010s to now, and just year by year, like maybe that percentage was like 90% transfer rumors, 10% tactical reviews, but maybe now it's like 70-30 or 60-40. And I do think that the average fan is getting more intelligent about the game and
I agree.
wants to um, just have kind of have a little bit more nuance, have a little bit more of that tactical discussion, hear what the manager actually thought, to continue growing, to continue learning, to continue getting ideas of what they're thinking. Because sometimes that's all we want, is just some rationale behind, like Luis Enrique, for example, like his Spain list. Like if you give us some rationale behind why Nacho wasn't included, then okay, we'll accept that. But like if we just don't hear it, then that's when maybe it keeps coming up in controversy and questions, and that's when you get all these articles and clickbait. And so I think sometimes it's just better to be a little bit more upfront and just a little bit more clear. And I think fans are getting more intelligent about the game and want more of that. But kind of going back to um, the Zidane letter.